under the leadership of ZANU-PF. So now you want me out because I spoke about Dukaundi. Who are you serving? What you're doing is unpatriotic and nationalistic, barbaric of the party you belong to. Barbaric of the party you belong to. I am living knowing that you have done the biggest mistake. I represent people on national issues here. My father was in Zambia, went to Tongogara for the struggle. He was Zapu. Which party? What you've done is wrong. What you have done is wrong. What you've done is wrong. What you want to appease the president. You're hoping that you be made speaker by bootlicking. It does not work like that. May God, make sure you get no other position in this country because you'll be danger. You start Kukuraundi.
Yeah.
You start Kukuraundi. Because you're sitting on that chair, it does not mean that you take the right offer. I represent the people. This is taxpayers' money you're using by abusing all that. You cannot abuse taxpayers' money by telling me to be kicked out here because I spoke about Kukuraundi. Was Kukuraundi not an act of ZANU-PF? Was Kukuraundi not an act of ZANU-PF? Why have you decided to stifle a debate of facts?
Greetings to you all. I welcome you to our weekly show, Reshaping Zimbabwe, where we try to map forward the way for our beloved country. And today we are privileged to have a special guest who is Advocate Adv Masiye. And he's going to lead us in discussing the implications of the Patriotic Bill to Zimbabweans. And he will try to use layman language too, so that even the people in the rural areas will be able to understand what this Patriotic Bill is all about. And today with me in the studio is another host, Denford Jory. So I want to give this time to Advocate Masiye to address us. Over to you, Advocate.
No, thank you very much for allowing me to come on this platform and present on this topic. It's quite unfortunate that we do have the Patriotic Bill, as it is commonly known, being passed by Parliament last week, and it's quite unfortunate that in this day and age, you would think that freedoms such as freedom of speech and other freedoms should be encouraged, should be protected, and seeing such an act coming out of Zimbabwe, it's sad. It's sad, so to say. And I'll be probably going through some of the provisions as they appear in the Patriotic Bill, which of course is supposed to then be signed by the president for it to become law. We anticipate that given how this bill was presented in Parliament, and given how and why it has to be presented at this time, and also given the track record of the government in trying to thwart freedoms, especially when it comes to the time of elections, I anticipate that the president of Zimbabwe will probably sign it into law before we have the elections coming in a couple of months. So just to dig in, this bill, which is, I said, commonly known as the Patriotic Bill, but its name is the Criminal Law Code Amendment Bill. was presented in Parliament, was first presented in Parliament in in last year, 23 December, and opposition parties and activists, criticized this bill from the onset. The long-threatened, patriotic bill, which we knew was coming. I know it had been spoken about in certain, forums by members of ZANU-PF before it was even presented in Parliament. We knew that this was going to come, and it was published and gazetted last year, I think, yes, on the same day, 23 December 2022. And the bill itself has got 4 aspects that it wants to deal with. Specifically, it wants to create the crime of willfully damaging the sovereignty and national interests of Zimbabwe. And secondly, it also wants to provide mandatory minimum prison sentences for rape. And fourthly, it will alter the definition of dangerous drugs whose possession, sale, and use are prohibited by the Charter. It also wants to narrow the scope of the crime of public office. So this is the general, areas that this bill wants to address. You see that the other 3 aspects are pretty much aspects that want to camouflage the introduction of thwarting free speech by people who want to criticize the government. And that one aspect of willfully damaging the sovereignty of national interests of Zimbabwe is pretty much as I can say, off when it comes to what this bill is, trying to address on the other 3 aspects, which are generally, common criminal acts that are there in our laws. So just to zoom in on the first aspect, which I'm going to present on, clause 2 of the act will basically insert, because this is just to go back, this is not an act. It's not a new act that is being presented. It's an amendment to an already existing law. So it's like inserting this crime into that law, which is the criminal code, which is already there in Zimbabwe. So the Patriotic Bill and the Act, also the Patriotic Bill or Act, as we commonly know it, is just an insertion of additional crimes to a law that is already existing, which is the criminal code. I just wanted to be clear, because I know people might think that a new law or a new act is going to come out called the Patriotic Act or the Patriotic Bill. There's nothing like that. It's an insertion of a provision in an already existing law, which is the criminal code. So the criminal code is the code that deals with all crimes, common law crimes, or civil law crimes, and so forth. It's the codification of all crimes that one can be held with if they are convicted or if they are arrested. So that's why we are seeing these 4 grounds being made or presented in this one act. Issues regarding rape, issues regarding possession of drugs, and issues regarding the abuse of public office. So I just wanted us to be clear on that one, that there's no new act specifically addressing the patriotic acts and so forth. It's an insertion of a new crime within already existing framework. So So clause 2 of the bill inserts that new provision into the code that creates the crime of willfully damaging the sovereignty and national interests of Zimbabwe. This crime is basically said to be or will be committed by a citizen or a permanent resident of Zimbabwe who takes an active part in a meeting involving or convened by an agent of a foreign country. If the citizen or resident knows or has reason to believe that the objective of the meeting is one of the following: to consider or plan armed intervention in Zimbabwe by the foreign government, or to subvert or overthrow the constitutional Zimbabwean government, or to consider, implement, or extend sanctions or trade boycott against Zimbabwe or against an individual or official official if the sanctions or boycott affect the substantial section of Zimbabwe. So this is one of these are some of the provisions that we have, and the penalties for these crimes are as follows. So for the crime of penalties for the crime differ according to the object of the meeting. So depending on what is being discussed, the penalty will either be stiff or be considered minimal. So if the objective of the meeting is to consider or plan armed intervention, the penalty for participating is the same as for treason, namely death or imprisonment for life. If the objective of the meeting is to subvert or overthrow the government, the penalty for participating in is the same as for subverting a constitutional government, namely imprisonment up to 20 years. And if the meeting is about sanctions or trade boycott, the penalty for participating in it is a fine up to 2,000, I think, RTGS, 200,000. It should be US, Zimbabwean dollars, or imprisonment up to 10 years or both. And in addition, if the crime is committed in aggravating circumstances, if the sanctions were implemented as a result of the meeting, or if a non-binding advisory was issued with the same effect as the sanction, or if the convicted person made a false statement during the meeting, and if the prosecutor so requests, the court may impose any of these following penalties. 1, deprivation of citizenship if the convicted person is a citizen by registration or dual citizenship. So here, I just want to stop here before I go to the next one. Here, it talks about removal or deprivation or of citizenship by registration or dual citizenship. So it would seem that probably this provision is probably speaking to those people who acquired citizenship, Zimbabwean citizenship, later on, probably through marriage or through other means, because we know that citizenship in terms of the constitution has got several grounds in which you can. It's birth, registration, and I think there are other grounds there. So if you would think that probably they are saying, yeah, if you are a registration, if you're a citizen by birth in Zimbabwe, well, we're not talking about the deprivation of citizenship, because, well, you acquired citizenship yes, of Zimbabwe through registration. So we're just unregistering you. But when it talks about dual citizenship now, this one does not care about you being a Zimbabwean by birth. If you just acquire a citizenship of another country, this then considers you for that deprivation of citizenship, because you've got dual citizenship. If you're a dual citizenship of Britain, America, or any other country, if you're probably convicted under this act, you will, they will take away that Zimbabwean citizenship for you. But now it then brings up a point that will they now be convicting or sentencing, let's say if they take away the Zimbabwean citizenship, would they now be sentencing an American citizen for this act? It's somehow a bit contradictory in terms of the punishment itself. So you are trying or going to court with a Zimbabwean citizenship who's got dual citizenship, then you're now sentencing an American citizen. So I mean, like it's a bit off for me in terms of that, because it's more like you're now sentencing a foreign national under an act which basically it does not or should not be convicting him. Like he's a foreign entity, and so he's a foreign citizen, and for the purposes of sentencing, but for the purposes of trying, he's a Zimbabwean citizen. So it's a bit of that. For the second bit is you can also have your residence cancelled, residence rights cancelled, if the convicted person is a permanent resident of Zimbabwe. You can also be prohibited from being registered as a voter or from voting for a period of 5 and 15 years, or you can also be prohibited from holding public office for a period of between 5 and 15 years. So this is basically the overview of what this patriotic bill, or this insertion of the criminal code provisions says. And just to now get into the comments, like into probably the concerns there of these provisions. If you look at planning armed intervention or subversion crime, which is in the code itself, you see that there's an overlap between the new crime insofar as it involves planning armed intervention or subverting the government, and the existing crimes of treason. So there's an overlap between those two. It would seem like, so why would you want to put in planned armed intervention when you actually have the crime of treason already? So the crime of treason is actually in section 20 of the criminal code, and subverting constitutional government is in section 22 of the code. So these are crimes that are already there. So why would you want to then spice them up? That's the question. So the overlap is so great that the new crime is really unreasonable in terms of this, of it being in this patriotic bill. I'll deal with the penalties, later on. If you go to the crime of sanctions, you advocating for sanctions and boycotts. Insofar as the new crime penalizes the consideration, planning, or implementation of sanctions or boycotts, it's actually a serious deterrence to freedom of speech in Zimbabwe. Not only will it be a crime to attend a meeting in order to plan or implement sanctions, it will be a crime if the meeting merely considers them. Like, even if it's not, meant to bring about, those sanctions. If the mention of sanctions comes up in that meeting, then it becomes an issue that can get you convicted in terms of this act. Sanctions may be imposed on Zimbabwe for various reasons. They may be, for example, be intended to persuade the government to comply with the country's international obligations. Should a Zimbabwean citizen be penalized for attending a meeting to discuss whether the country should be placed under sanctions for violating its obligations under, SADC or AU? That's the question. Because these are like internationally recognized, means of forcing a government to comply. So if these are then considered as one of the means that should have Zimbabwe comply, then even if that meeting was not going to talk about that, but if it's considered in that meeting that, sure, should we implement sanctions on Zimbabwe? Then they say, well, let's hold it for now, but sanctions are going to be something that we might implement if they don't comply. That statement in itself can get you convicted and get you imprisonment for up to 20 years, as we saw. Even though that was not part of the agenda when the meeting started. And that's what the act then goes on to say. So another thing is like, or probably if there's a discussion whether the country's banking system should be blacklisted for failing to take measures against money laundering or terrorist financing, or recommended by the Financial Act Task Force. We saw like a few months ago, the talk of the gold mafia and also the RBZ, whether there would be considered for blacklisting if they don't deal with these issues appropriately. So any discussions around that, or even consideration of those reasons, or of those means of getting Zimbabwe to comply with international financing, can also be considered as a crime under this act. So this is a serious, as I said, is a serious way of infringing on freedoms of expression, and also academic freedoms too. So even if you are in a setting, in a classroom setting, or writing in academic papers on various options or ways that Zimbabwe can get to implement some of these international policies, then you can also be tried or arrested under this Patriotic bill, because you'll be talking about this or even considering sanctions or boycotts on Zimbabwe because of virus issues. So the new provisions are they're also vaguely worded. I mean, to say that there are some words that are there which don't make sense. They are like convoluted, and some of them are even difficult to understand. It would seem like this bill was drafted by Chinotimba. Not to say anything about Chinotimba's intellect or anything, but it's some of those words that you wonder, like, so what are these guys saying here? Are they repeating themselves, or are they trying to hide some things in the act? So the drafters are don't hesitate to use 2, 3, even 4 words where one word could actually say something. So they are open. So those words are actually open to misinterpretation, and therefore, and law enforcement officers are likely to interpret them as broadly as possible. So we know how they are doing. Good. No. Tekasabata apa. I'm now going to show. Tekasabata ne issues. Tohabata ne issues. Of which that should not be something that a law should do. A law should be very clear and precise when it comes to it defining the act itself. So even opposition activists who are even mentioned sanctions in the presence of a foreigner may find themselves arrested and put on trial. And because of this vagueness of the crime, the difficulty of proving it, because of the vagueness of the crime and the difficulty of proving, all these issues, a trial would drag on for months or even years. So, if the law is not quite clear on what it's saying, then you leave room for argument, a lot of argument, which is I'm saying it can take years, it can take months, getting someone to be found not guilty, so to say, or found guilty, because there's that misinterpretation and vagueness of the law itself, and it will also make it difficult for even magistrates to try them. So I'll talk about these provisions later on, or these words that I'm talking about later on. So the penalties themselves, some of these penalties prescribed for the crime are unconstitutional. As I noted before, for attending a meeting to consider or plan armed intervention, the penalty is the same as for treason. And under Section 20 of the Code, the penalty for treason is death. However, Section 48 of the Constitution states that death penalty can be imposed only on persons convicted of murder committed in aggravating circumstances. Hence, it cannot be imposed on persons convicted of treason or the new crime, which this bill states. So, Section 20 of the Code should have been aligned with the Constitution a long time ago. The current Section 20 of the Code is basically unconstitutional. Of course, we have not had anyone being sentenced to death for treason, and hence probably that's why some lawyers have not really taken this to court, or maybe they have, but Section 20 itself is unconstitutional because the Section 48 of the Constitution clearly states that the death penalty can only be imposed on persons convicted of murder committed in aggravating circumstances, and not treason or this so-called new crime in the Patriotic Bill. So that's probably that about it. So the additional penalty of deprivation of citizenship, which can be imposed on someone convicted of attending a meeting to consider sanctions, infringes on Section 39 of the Constitution. So Section 29 of the Constitution provides that citizenship by registration can be revoked only if it was obtained by fraud, if the citizen communicated with an enemy during a war in which Zimbabwe was engaged. So those are the only grounds in terms of the Constitution. So this act cannot come in and purport to be amending the Constitution. That cannot be. That cannot be. It's pretty much, as I said, probably an act of someone who was angry somewhere at the Jongwe Shek building was just putting in all those things without really considering the Constitution. Like, the Constitution is there. That's our Constitution. So any law that is in contravention of the Constitution then basically is not law at all. So that's an infringement in our constitutional rights. So citizenship by birth can be revoked only if it was obtained by fraud, mistake, and there is So citizenship by birth can be revoked only if it was obtained by fraud or mistake, and this is so whether or not the person is a dual citizen. So basically, if you are convicted of this crime of under the Patriotic Bill of attending meetings that consider sanctions or probably war against Zimbabwe, you cannot have your citizenship revoked by birth if it was not fraud or mistake. So having this act coming in and just taking away that right to citizenship is basically, a non-event and in contravention of the Constitution. So the additional penalty of prohibiting someone against being registered as a voter contravenes paragraph 2 of the 4th schedule of the Constitution, right, which allows a person to be disqualified from registration only if he or she has committed an offense under the Electoral Act. So this bill is not saying anything about the Electoral Act. It's just saying, something about the actions of attending, or probably contributing in, and probably saying falsehoods in a meeting against Zimbabwe and so forth, and nothing to do with the Electoral Act. So basically, you cannot take away someone's right to vote if they have not committed any offense in terms or under the Electoral Act. So those are some of the questions there. So in brief, it's that. So as I said, there are 4 grounds that this bill wants to attack. I'll just skip the rest and probably go into the last one, which probably is feeding in, to me, probably the intention of of the drafters or even the government when it comes to the whole general way of dealing with the freedom of speech in Zimbabwe as we get into the elections. So this provision of abuse of office, which is also being introduced together with the Patriotic Acts or bill, it talks about crimes committed when public officers intentionally do something that is contrary to their duty or omit to do something that they have a duty to do in order to show favor or disfavor to someone. The amendment is apparently intended to make it necessary for the prosecution to prove that an accused person, an accused public officer, knew or he was acting contrary to his duty. I say, probably apparently, because the opening words of the new sections are missing from the act, from the bill. So it is impossible to say precisely what the amendment to this crime will be. So probably the clause should be corrected. There's no way of knowing what these guys are trying to probably do with this amendment or the abuse of public office. Because I once said in one presentation that I was asked about Hubert Angel, what were the possibilities of him getting in trouble, or which provisions of the law could get him in trouble. And I cited this section, section 174, that if Zimbabwe was serious about, the crime that Hubert Angel is apparently or was apparently cited in, he was supposed to be convicted or in fact tried or arrested under this section 174 of abusing public office and in engaging in activities that perpetuate theft of Zimbabwean resources and so forth. So this was one good provision that you could probably be arrested with by or under, and probably tried that you talk about ambassadorship, then you were going around committing crimes in the name of our country, and then you will you are going to be tried under this act. But its insertion and probably the vagueness of the provisions then probably make it something that someone inserted it in there, and then later on they had a second thought. So probably in conclusion, this act basically is something that is rather shows signs of having crafted in haste, so to say, to just craft this law for whatever reason. But we know that this law was probably muted as far back as March 2021, and they had these elections probably in their thoughts that they wanted to have this thing come into law, or these provisions amended by the election date. And we know that quite recently the elections date was also announced. So that haste of having it's not even a coincidence to me that you have the election date being announced in the same weeks, and then you have this law being passed there, probably in the same weeks by Parliament. It's not coincidence. It's something that is well crafted, agenda towards thwarting, freedoms that are already provided in the Constitution. So the bill also lacks on clarity, which also makes it hard for the prosecutors to secure convictions against people charged with willfully damaging the sovereignty and national interests of Zimbabwe. And it also complicates the tasks of the court when sentencing other crimes, and so forth. The rule of law basically requires criminal laws to be clear, precise, and easy to understand, so that everyone knows when they are breaking the law. Vague laws are a hallmark of repressive governments, which use them to keep their people, in check or cowed to some submission. They should be these kinds of laws, they should not be tolerated, and they're actually unconstitutional, and defies all the tenets of democracy. And the bill coming in again at the time when we have elections, it's something that is also suspicious, and you actually can clearly see the motive of it coming in now, because it's pretty much there to thwart the freedoms that I highlighted above. And some of these provisions in statements that are there make it even difficult to really see what's going on or interpret. So we know how our ZRP, behaves in Zimbabwe, especially with the laws that are somehow clear. They just arrest you for that. We've got Honorable Job Scholar, who's incarcerated right now for a crime that he said to have committed when when the law actually says something else, but because of probably someone who is at Shek building just pointing that he has to be arrested, then he gets arrested under certain provisions of the act. So now coming in of this Patriotic bill with these new provisions, which are even more vague, it will actually see a lot of people being arrested for things that are non-existent. And the other thing is like, so who is going to be the judge of your crime? Because of this vagueness, you would want someone who is well vested in the interpretation of laws to probably come up with whether someone is being convicted and so if someone has committed a crime under this act or not. So I'll stop here because I wouldn't want to probably continue talking and probably answer questions. Thank you.
You are muted, Danford.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Advocate Masiye. Ndinoda kutendai nenguva yamatipa yekurangarira zviri kuitika mukati menyika yedu. Asi ndine mubvunzo mumwe chete, rega ndiite iri miviri, yekuti pamanga muchipa presentation yenyu include zvinhu zvakawanda zvinoratidza kuti bumbiro renyika remutemo rakaitwa violated numerous times nekuda kwemutemo uri kuda kuiswa iwoyu. Mataura nenyaya yekuti munhu anokwanisa kuva anotongerwa rufu mushure mekunge apara mhosva yamataura. Then mataura nenyaya yekuti munhu anokwanisa kuva anoita kuti asanzi citizenship yake itwe revoked on the grounds dzekuti munhu anenge kana achinge akazvarwa mukati menyika yeZimbabwe mushure mekunge zvaitika nenzira isingaiti yekubiridzira. And then there are a number of other issues dzamaincluda futi. Saka mubvunzo wangu wandoda kuti ndiise kwamuri ndewekuti zvinoreva here kuti government, in particular parliament, ma-members of parliament vachiuyisa mutemo wakaita saiwoyuyu vanga vasingazivi kuti pari kukanganiswa mutemo we-constitution. ndo mubvunzo wangu wekutanga. Wepiri ndewekuti tichinzwa maparliamentarians neivo vakuru vehurumende vachitaura nyaya yekuti mutemo uyoyu uri kuda kuti uiswe, tinokwanisa kuvati tinoufananidza nemutemo yakaiswa kuUnited States of America ya1799 wekutanga ndewe-Logan Act. Wechipiri wakaitwa futi mu2001 mushure mekunge I think it was September 2001 mushure mekunge maTalibans aita bomb part of the buildings ekuAmerica, ende mutemo uyo unonzi Patriot Bill, Patriot Act. Imimi sekuona kwenyu munoona here kuti there are some parallels between what came into being in America as far as the Logan Act as well as the Patriot Act that is in place. Thank you very much.
Oh yes, no, thank you, Comrade Denford. It's for the first question, it's quite sad that you have Mutemo passing through all the phases of the constitution, of the parliament debating when you have all these unconstitutional provisions. We know that this law or this bill was pretty much rushed through by ZANU-PF parliamentarians, and I think when it was passed, I think people went into the night, the opposition members, criticizing the bill and also raising these issues. So for members of ZANU-PF, parliamentary members of ZANU-PF, to insist on having a bill, come out of parliament with all these contraventions to the constitution, it reflects what we've seen over time immemorial of the flagrant disregard of human rights, the flagrant disregard of citizens' rights, coming out from this current establishment, or the current government. Just to put in, of course, they always talk about. I know, there were some people who were, also putting parallels with other laws, especially when it comes to the United States. Like the Logan Act. The Logan Act was actually, it came into being an act in 1799, and it actually pretty much criminalizes negotiating by an unauthorized American citizen with a foreign government having a dispute with the United States. So it's pretty much zooming in to the issue of negotiating, probably during war times when one purports to be an agent of the US, getting into negotiations and so forth. So just to probably just briefly interrogate or talk about it, the intention of the Logan Act is to prevent unauthorized negotiations from undermining the government's position, and just to maybe a comparison on the sentencing, you'd see that with our law that is going to be law, you'd see that in as much as the Logan Act is probably talking about more serious issues or not, the fine there is just 5,000 fine that one can be sentenced with. But in comparison with ours is now talking about death. It's actually talking about life imprisonment. It's talking about 20 years imprisonment, and so forth. So you would see the intentions there, they're pretty much different. They are not intended, if you talk about Logan Act, to me, if you look at the Logan Act, it's intended to probably make sure that citizens are probably aware that, Shama, if we're negotiating with the foreign government, if we're if we're in dispute, let's say, for example, with Russia, and you go there and purport to be trying to negotiate American position with Russia and so forth, then you'll be found guilty. You've been sentenced under the Logan Act and be found guilty or sentenced with 5,000 fine. And if just to see how this thing has been there since 1799, like the Logan Act, and only 2 people have been indicted. Only 2 people. We're talking about 1799, way before Zimbabwe was established. Pasata power ni nyika in Zimbabwe as a country as it is right now. This law was already there, and only 2 people were indicted under this act. One in 1802 and the other in 1858. And none of them have been convicted. So you see how the intention is when the law is implemented. But with ours, we know, basically, as soon as it becomes law, we know that hundreds of people are going to prison, and the people are just going to have their citizenship, taken away for things that the government, through this act, are not pretty much trying to address, but are pretty much looking into trying to deal with opposition and so forth. So I know this was a long answer to your question, but this is what I have to say for now.
Thank you very much, Advocate, and thank you, Mr. Danford, for your questions. And I'm also surprised to say when it suits us, we want to pretend to be copying from America, that Logan Act and so on. But when it also suits us, we want to rubbish America and have our look east policy. So I have 2 questions for you, Advocate. The first one is the relationship now with this act that's going to be passed in the private voluntary organizations. Because in my head, I'm thinking most of them are foreign donors. For example, if I take the World Food Program, if I go there as a Zimbabwean and say what the government is not doing or is doing that's making people suffer starvation so that I get help, am I not being patriotic, or it's going to be okay? And then my second question, when it comes to preparations for the forthcoming elections, I don't see how any opposition party can campaign freely and say things as they are without being accused of being unpatriotic. Because I think we have kind of redefined the word patriotic, or we have our own mini definition of being patriotic. So how safe is it going to be for people to campaign? Thank you.
Sorry, I was a bit muted there. Yeah, it's pretty much sad that you mentioned that it's not going to be safe at all to talk about issues of national interest and also to hold the government to account for the fear of getting arrested under these laws, because pretty much the law is vague in that regard. It does not precisely talk about the crimes or the crime that it really wants to talk about. It's widely worded there are some provisions that are there that are pretty much not really, not really acceptable, and so forth. So if you are in a meeting where probably, as you said, like it's a non-governmental organization that you'll be attending, and there's talk about about Zimbabwe, and what can be done in order to have it in compliance, even if it's like food distribution. If you talk about Zimbabwe in such a way that you are criticizing what it's doing, like, yeah, we're from Zimbabwe, we had this allocation of food in Uzuma Maramba Pfungwe, and 50% of that food was taken by ZANU-PF members, who then distributed it to campaign, therefore depriving, for example, if you're talking about that, probably in a setting where you're giving a feedback to the donors in America or the United Nations, that can pretty much be seen as an unpatriotic act, and which can be considered as a crime that is willfully damaging the sovereignty or national interests of the country. And what does it really mean? Like damaging the sovereignty and national interest of the country. This is not even defined clearly in this law. So it's so much wide and vaguely worded that anything or even any act that is deemed to be anti-ZANU-PF can be considered as unpatriotic and also damaging the national interests of the country. So basically, it's one of those things. And you also rightly pointed out that it's difficult. It will be difficult for anyone opposing the government to even come out of the country and talk about what's happening within their own political party. Like, yeah, I'm here, I'm Adv Masiye, I come from the CCC, and members of my political party are being persecuted by the government of Zimbabwe for merely talking about the violations of human rights. And also lawyers who are part of the CCC are also getting arrested for merely representing their clients, who would have been murdered, and persecuted by members of the. If you are saying that at an international platform, let's say even talking to a special rapporteur on human rights at an international platform, then this crime is somehow saying, yeah, you can be convicted. But as I said, it is widely worded, of which, if it was me getting into court, I would have a lot of things to argue in favor of my client. Starting from the constitutionality of the act itself, starting from the vagueness of some of these words that are in the bill themselves. But when someone is brought to court, in as much as you would have all these arguments, we're talking about the right to liberty. And what is happening to him at that time, his liberties are being infringed on something that probably he will not be convicted for, or something that is going to drag for months. Are incarcerated. And if you look at the seriousness of the sentencing itself, there's a likelihood that that person will not be granted bail, because they'll be saying that this crime is serious. If he's convicted, he's likely going to be killed, or sentenced to life imprisonment, or he's got a sentence of up to 20 years imprisonment. So these are grounds themselves for the prosecution to then vigorously argue against the bail, citing that the crime is so serious that if he's released, he's likely going to skip bail. So this is just in the reverse, that there will be so many liberties that will be infringed if this act is going to come into law. In as much as it is vague, and lawyers can argue around some of these issues, and put out the issue of someone being convicted, beyond a reasonable doubt, and so forth, what will be happening to that person in the meantime? Probably is going to spend almost a year in imprisonment, like what Honorable Job Scholar is facing right now, only to be acquitted of that serious offense, so forth. So it's something that that is infringing on multiple rights: right to liberty, free speech, and I would also want to throw in there the right to conscience. So if you think that no, Zimbabwe basically needs to be, put under some internationally recognized means of complying with its own constitution, then that can get you in trouble for for undermining the sovereignty of the country. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Advocate Masiye. I think as we are getting to the end of our program, before I give back to our host, I just wanted to say I haven't got any more questions. Only to say we appreciate your coming in, and we also appreciate your submissions. That has helped not only me, but the greater part of Zimbabweans who were not familiar with what has been happening as far as our the recently passed Patriotic bill is concerned. So I think what we need to say before we close is quickly say Zimbabweans have just been taken aback, especially as we are drawing closer to an election. What is likely going to be happening now is just like Dr. Gwekwere has highlighted, that we are getting to an election, and there's a coincidence of the passing of the Patriotic bill. It's likely going to be giving problems to the opposition activists, members of the non-governmental organizations, as well as ordinary citizens in the country, because they are not familiar with the provisions of the bill. You were talking about infringements of someone's conscience. You might not really understand what I am saying is going to be violating the provisions of the bill that has just been passed. And unfortunately, it's going to be impacting negatively to how information dissemination is going to be processed as we are going closer to the election. So I would want to believe that when those MPs and the regime in particular crafted this thing, they deliberately did that in order to confuse people and also in order to stifle people's opinions, because everybody is scared. Even if I would want to objectively engage members of the diplomatic corps, members of the SADC region, African Union, it will be very difficult, because I am not very familiar of what should I say or what should I not say because of what has just been done by the regime. But thank you very much, Advocate Masiye, for your submissions. I will take back the mic to Dr. Gwekwere for your final say.
Thank you very much, Comrade Danford. Thank you, Advocate. I would like to say maybe we need to learn from other countries how people...
Sorry, Dr. Gwekwere, there's a question in the private. Please pick it up urgently.
Okay. We have a question. Sorry guys for the disruption. We have a question which asks Advocate Masiye. Advocate Masiye, you seem glued on infringement of rights. What of infringements of rights, measures, laws, UN laws, and the treaties?
Maybe if you could increase your volume, or maybe I could just read it if you don't mind, please. Yeah.
Please go ahead.
Advocate Masiye, you seem glued on infringement of rights, You seem to be repeating on that. What of infringements against major laws of the country, of Zimbabwean law acts here? Several. And also UN laws, treaties as well. And I'm taking it here a gear up. How are, for instance, UPR reviews going to be conducted? Because UPR reviews are done outside Zimbabwe. And before we even get there, let's talk about our own laws. There are major laws, major Zimbabwean laws that are being infringed by the very existence of the Patriotic Bill, are there not? So the question there is, the Patriotic Bill, is it not just a piece of unlawful, an unlawful construct which is being introduced, no matter how clean it may seem? Are we not having here something being introduced on the people that is totally and completely unlawful?
No, thank you very much, Sima. I think you actually asked the question and also answered it there. This act in itself not only infringes on rights that I highlighted, like which are in the Constitution. If you look at the right to freedom of expression, it's an internationally recognized right in terms of all UN. In the UN Charter and other treaties or conventions that Zimbabwe is also part of, and also even if you want to even take it home, if you look at the African Charter too, it also talks about freedom of expression. Even though there are qualifications to freedom of expression, this piece of legislation then goes on to then try to deal with even thoughts of whatever measures that can be implemented on Zimbabwe, and also debate on those issues, even though that debate might not produce what they say the result. If it sanctions, even though it does not produce those sanctions and so forth, even if it does produce those sanctions. So it's pretty much a convolution of all those things coming out to infringe internationally recognized rights, which are freedom of expression, freedom to free speech, if we're talking about the media, or academic freedoms too, which are also internationally recognized under all these conventions, which Zimbabwe is part of, including the UN Charter, the convention, all those conventions and so forth. So it's when I'm talking about rights, I'm not pretty much really zooming in to our local rights. I'm pretty much talking about rights at international platforms. So when you come to the UPR, which is those periodical reviews that every country goes through every session and so forth. These are some of the issues that when we discuss like here and also engage with other organizations, we can also submit those issues to the UPR and so forth, and Zimbabwe can be interrogated on those issues, and they can respond and so forth. But as we know that these United Nations systems are just there as it's more like peer reviews, like where other countries or other organizations can just come in and talk about this and make it public, and have Zimbabwe respond and probably be held to what they respond to see if they are going to implement or probably and then when they come back again and so forth. And these discussions can also inform how Zimbabwe at that international level can be engaged and also can be held accountable. And as I mentioned, one of the pieces of accountability when you're talking about at the international level sanctions. So we're talking about sanctions. When I talk about sanctions, I think some you just think of economic sanctions. You know, there's various types of sanctions, but the word sanction also it just means to issues like guys, if you are not abiding to international standards that you actually subscribed to, then we're going to probably talk about you guys getting some penalty of sorts, which are then deemed sanctions. So if that then comes to that, and you are actually part of that discussion, you are going to be found guilty in terms of that act, even though that is a recognized way of dealing with rogue states, or dealing with with states that are not complying with international standards, especially when you're talking about the UN Charter and other conventions that are there. As we know, the UN does not have a police that police countries on the implementation of the UN Charter and the rights that are there in those international statutes and conventions. What they can do, especially what countries can do, is like, okay, these guys are taking it too far. What we're going to do is like, we deal with you bilaterally, on these issues, and force you to do these issues. Otherwise, we are not going to, give you aid on this aspect and so forth. Those are sanctions, right? But if you are in that meeting as a Zimbabwean and you are part of that universal periodical review, and you are talking about these issues and so forth, and then you put in suggestions on how Zimbabwe can be held accountable, those the suggestions that you put in across can be held to be in contravention of the Patriotic Bill, this amendment that is coming in, and then infringe on free speech, free debate, academic freedoms, and probably other freedoms that come with it that are protected not only under the international structure, but are also protected in the Constitution of Zimbabwe. So basically, when I talk about that, it's just like these rights are intertwined. The constitutional rights, we've got regional, sub-regional rights that are talked about in the in the African Charter. We also have some international conventions that Zimbabwe is also a signatory to, and we also have the UN Charter that all countries that are part of the UN structure should abide by, and also make sure that they implement, respect, and promote those rights, which we see with this thing is probably coming out as something that they are not really considering at this time. So thank you, Siba, for bringing that, and also probably making it clear that not only does this act infringe on just basic rights, it also infringes on Zimbabwe's obligations in terms of international law.
Well, thank you, Advocate. So basically, it's a broken law. It's a law that is already broken from inception. It is a law that is devoid of law. It's a law that must be broken. Because it is broken, it is devoid. And perhaps, let me ask as I end that, don't you think that maybe the best way Zimbabweans need to deal with this is to just break this stupid law, this unlawful law? Just break it. If it means you have to go to prison, go there. If it means you have to die, you die. As long as you're dealing with something that is totally unlawful, that must be dealt with once and for all. And Zimbabweans should not be scared of something that is totally unlawful, even by Zimbabwean standards, even by village standards.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Koma Simba, for your submission, and thank you for your question earlier. We want to appreciate our viewers and our audience on other platforms. I see Mkomatino there. We appreciate you, and other people that are on Zimai, that are on YouTube, and other channels. I wanted to say in conclusion that being patriotic is not something that can be forced down somebody's throat. You cannot force me to love something if it's not lovable. So first of all, make something attractive, make something beautiful, make something appetizing so that people welcome it. It doesn't have to be forced down people's lives. Where I live, people love their country. And when I say love their country, I'm talking of the majority, even little children, even little kids want to save the army from the time they are in high school. They enroll in a class to say, I want to join the military or I want to join the Marines and defend my country. They love it so much because the country is something to offer. So I think as a way forward, Zimbabwe must have something to offer its people so that they love their country. And also, if I point out things that are going wrong, it's not that I'm not patriotic. I'm just wishing for change. I'm just wishing for restoration or correction of things. I want to leave this time to Advocate to give us his parting shots before we end the show.
Thank you, Doc. Thank you very much. And firstly, like in conclusion, I just want to thank you for, for this platform. I know, in fact, it's actually timely, given that this law is about to, this bill is about to become law. And in one platform, I actually suggested that this could have been a very good time to have lawyers, bring a sort of action in the Constitutional Court to deal with these issues, so that the Constitutional Court can deal with some of these constitutional infringements that that are highlighted, and also stop it from becoming law. As we know, there are three structures of government, which is basic: the parliament, the executive, and the judiciary. And I think this is the time when the parliament, which is mandated in drafting laws, should be held to account before the executive, brings about that law through the signing, by the president. And it's also good to challenge these laws at this time, in order to create that, that trail, that yes, we did that, and when when these issues now eventually come before the Constitutional Court, when the law is now enacted, it will be probably easy for advocates of human rights and also advocates of citizens to to have a point of reference, especially if there are arguments in the Constitutional Court that bring about these provisions that are in violation of the Constitution. And lastly, just to ride on what Simba said about disrespecting unjust laws. Yes, that can be another way of advocating for for the change of those laws. And when you don't respect those laws, basically you have to then follow up with ways of dealing with that law, which will basically be challenging the constitutional provisions of that law through an already set up system that is there. If it's in Zimbabwe, probably through the Constitutional Court. If you are deemed to be have infringed, then you go and advocate for the for the removal of that law or specific provisions of that law through the Constitutional Court. And I think, just citing one author who talked about this, his name is Thomas Aquinas, who said that an unjust law is a human law that is not rooted in the internal law and natural law. And any law that uplifts human personality, any law that uplifts human personality is just, and any law that does not uplift human personality is unjust. So basically, what we are seeing here is an unjust law coming in, and hopefully, which of course is something that will be a pipe dream. Hopefully, the president of Zimbabwe will not sign it into law, but we know that that is not something that is going to happen. But if it indeed signed into law, then it's something that citizens need to take upon themselves to challenge the law through the courts, and also through internationally recognized institutions such as the United Nations and so forth, and stop advocating and not to stop advocating for the respect, implementation, and observance of human rights in Zimbabwe. Thank you very much for inviting me, and until we meet again, thank you.
Advocate, before we shut, I wanted to propose, in my view, if Zimbabweans are going to express the truth on this piece of unlawful law, they're going to need, between today and the day Mnangagwa signs this law, and even afterwards, pick up the phone on live video or on space like this, phone the US Embassy, or phone Washington, phone London, phone China, Beijing as well, and report the findings in the audits that are being announced in Parliament, for instance, about the looting. Just do it publicly. Everyone just be in open defiance of this unlawful law. Don't you think that will just shut the piece of nonsense down? And if Zimbabweans intend to protest on 23 August or on 24 August, they need to start doing it now in this open combat.
Thank you very much, Mkoma Simba, for your suggestion. And thank you, every listener, every participant. We meet again next Sunday this time. And thank you, Citizen Hande, who is operating from behind the scenes there. Thank you and goodbye to you all.